Paradox. All right, guys, it's Jahlon with the Paradox Gaming Network. And when I'm streaming Ashes of Creation, one of the things I allow viewers to do is save up Paradox points so that they can put a topic on the agenda that they want to do a 10-minute deep dive into. This past Saturday, we got a really good one, and it was with gathering being a focus in Ashes. Just being able to gather rare resources and be more efficient at it would be expected. What other things could Intrepid do to make it more fun besides that? Any ideas to benchmark from other games? Well, I don't know. Let's deep dive in and find out. So, I do want to talk about gathering, and that is a great question, and we'll spend 10 minutes on that. I understand that some people like gathering minigames, okay? And gathering minigames were fun in Final Fantasy XI or Final Fantasy XIV. I will say that the Final Fantasy XIV original minigames, the original minigames were more fun than the current one. The current one is just obnoxious. The current Final Fantasy XIV gathering minigame is so obnoxious that they actually allow you to bypass it, and there's now a box that says auto gather. So you know right there, if the developers have gone ahead and bypassed their own minigame, that they know it's not fun and people don't enjoy it. Now, the piece of Final Fantasy XIV's current minigame that I would like to benchmark is the timed node spawns. Now, yes, it is obnoxious to have an in-game clock. So when I'm looking for rare resources in Final Fantasy XIV, you can set your in-game clock to Eorzea time. And I know at midnight to 3 a.m. Eorzea time, a unspoiled node will spawn roughly at this spot. And then I go there and I get the rarest resources. The problem is, once you're a max level 80 gatherer with everything's pentamelded, there's no more challenge. The mini game of the pulsing minor rock or the swinging arc on the tree, those went away. The problem with those, what you're saying, the Gold Saucer mini game where you chop the tree, that's the original Final Fantasy XIV gathering method. That wasn't a mini game. They scrapped that in Final Fantasy XIV vanilla, if you will, not A Realm Reborn. That was actually how we gathered in the actual game. That rewarded people who were good at gathering. The problem is how do you build a system like that that doesn't become dependent on latency, ping, lag? There are just days your connection isn't spot on and you can't hit the marker no matter how hard you try. I like the thought of an engaging gathering process. I know some of you are going to throw rotten tomatoes at me when I say this, but I think the resource gathering in EVE Online is an amazing way to do it. EVE Online doesn't allow you to passively just not pay attention to your screen. You have to outfit a ship specifically designed for gathering. You have to decide if you're just going to run back and forth to the station with one cargo hold full of resources. There are command ships specifically designed to increase mining yield. So it becomes a team effort. I think it's kind of ridiculous in any MMO where I go out with my axe, I knock down a tree, and then I get 4 logs. I just want to say that's completely ridiculous. It should be it should take me almost, 10 minutes to chop up a single tree, but because there should be multiple steps involved. I should get a lot more than just 4 logs off of a tree because I knock it down. There should be X number of logs, X number of branches, X number of leaves. But then the problem is, at the end of the day, it's a game, and players don't want to sit there for 10 minutes completely felling a tree. Back to Final Fantasy XIV, you have the ability to go up to the infinitely respawning trees, And this time I pull out feathers from the bird's nest, and the next time I pull out chestnuts or maple sap or beehive chips. There's a lot of different things I can pull out of the tree. The problem is that the trees are infinite. I don't believe resources should be infinite because then uh, there's no value to the items. I love the fact that Intrepid is making a limited resource game. Wonder how the resource spawns work with the freeholds. They could block the spawns. That is true. That is absolutely true. Another thing people forget about with ashes is there's going to be large veins of, say, silver. So normally you go out and you see the single one-hit silver ore node. You hit it, you get 4 silver ore, and you walk away. There's actually going to be large yield veins where there might be 10,000 silver in that vein. Your guild finds it. Now your guild needs to hurry up and mine it out. They did talk about extractors on freeholds. That's interesting. That's kind of the Final Fantasy or not the Final Fantasy. That's kind of the Arcage miner house. So that's something to look into. The Arcage Miner House had a 6-hour cycle that would fill up to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. When you hit it, you got the resources. So that's kind of an interesting mini-ish game. But I'd like to see it be more than just I turn on my extractor, it runs for 2 hours, and then I get X number of resources. Other games to benchmark. I can't think of a really good game other than Eve where gathering is meaningful. 1 second. I'm going to pause your time at 3:15. All right, 3:15. Wow. We're back on the clock. I don't think somebody said Wildstar. Sometime the mine was an enemy that could drop resources, and other times a tunnel will open up to even more mines. You know, Bless Online had that. Bless Online had it where you could end up going into these little gathering zones. So that's cool, except it's a cool idea. It just doesn't work for Ashes. In Ashes of Creation, Embertech says in Wildstar the enemy was a mine, or the mine was an enemy. Don't forget, in Ashes of Creation, you might go to hit a tree, and that tree might get up, turn around, be a tree ant, and not like the fact that you just hit it in the ass with a chopping tree, and it may fight you. You may go to mine a stone node, and it might be a little earth elemental or a little earth golem that turns around and says, now we box. You might be fishing, and you might fish up, and I'm going to use a Final Fantasy creature. You might fish up a Sahagin, and now you're fighting. It's going to be interesting too, because the risk versus reward of gathering gear is most of the time when you have gathering gear on, it increases your gathering yield immensely, but it is not very good for combat. So I'm interested to see you said what other things could Intrepid do to make it more fun besides that? I'm actually interested in waiting to see how Intrepid is going to do their gathering gear. I think gathering gear is an often overlooked piece of the gearing pot. They're like, "Oh, you're a miner, but I don't have any miner gear. Oh, have a little hat. Oh, now I'm happy I have a little hat, and it gives me +3. It gives me +3 mining." Well, it didn't really flow into the design. Yes, there's gathering gear. I can tell you in Arcage, the gathering gear was useless except for the speed buff, the how quickly could I hit. In Final Fantasy XIV, there is absolutely gathering and crafting gear, because I love Final Fantasy XIV in that when you're gathering, you're a miner or a botanist or a fisher. You don't have access to your other skills. that's specific to their class system. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Gathering being a focus, I'm waiting for a lot more. But yeah, EVE Online is a game that I would benchmark. I would not benchmark the mini games from Final Fantasy XIV, because I know some people are like gathering in Final Fantasy XIV is so cool. I'm like, how long have you been playing? And they're like 3 weeks, and I'm like, yeah, let me know when you've been playing for 5 years and how much you hate your life. So, good, good focused topic for 10 minutes. What are you still doing here? Nobody ever stays this long. This is the end screen. Well, since you're here, there's a couple other videos I think you should check out. And all those names, those are my patrons over at Patreon. I couldn't do this without them. So, big thanks to them for all their support.